take a listen here to something that Bruce Dickinson said about Black Sabbath and pay particular attention to all of his points, and then I'm going to tell you why I think he's wrong. So let's listen in right here to something that he had to say about Black Sabbath.
But yeah, the first two records are amazing. Well, no, I mean, Volume 4 was incredible as well, you know. What a consistent band, you know, I mean, and it's Geezer and Tony. You know, I mean, if you look at all the people, all the different vocalists, not just Ozzy, but they've all been, Born Again, great album. You know, everybody goes, oh, forget that one. No, it's a great album.
So Bruce Dickinson calls Black Sabbath one of the greatest metal bands of all time, no argument there, and he specifically points out the first two albums. He goes on to say that the power of Black Sabbath was fundamentally tied to Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler. And to be clear, Tony and Geezer are both brilliant and they're both essential to Sabbath, but I think that Bruce Dickinson is wrong about not only the first two Sabbath albums, but also about why Black Sabbath worked at all. Because the original Black Sabbath wasn't built around a core pair, it was a band where no member could be replaced. Bruce Dickinson's view fits a common metal framework. Tony invents the riff language and Geezer defines the lyrical darkness, and everything else supports that core. And historically that logic seems to hold. Sabbath continued on with multiple eras, multiple singers, and different lineups, and some of it was outstanding. But original Sabbath wasn't outstanding because of just two components. It was outstanding because of the chemistry of all four members. Ozzy didn't sing over riffs, he sang inside of them. He was kind of detached and vulnerable at the same time, and slightly unhinged. His voice made the music feel possessed, not just performed. Bill Ward didn't just play heavy drums, he swang, he breathed. That jazz-inflected looseness is why early Sabbath feels so human and not mechanical. If you remove Bill Ward, the music becomes almost too heavy. Tony Iommi is irreplaceable. Without this riff master and his vision, there is no Sabbath, and Geezer's lyrics, while foundational, kept evolving in real time, and that made the band a living entity. So basically, all four of them were necessary. There was no hierarchy. It was like a four-way feedback loop. Now, let's listen into something that Ronnie James Dio had to say about the nature of Sabbath's chemistry.
Tony Iommi should not have carried on. Once you have Sabbath, that was the Sabbath with Ozzy, which was the first, again, great, wonderful heavy metal band, and then you have the second edition, which was the Dio edition. That was a special band. It was a special, unique sounding kind of band who made music for the 80s. Sabbath was making music for the late 60s and parts of the 70s.
So basically, I think he's right in that clip. If you listen closely to what he's saying that Dio era Sabbath is brilliant, but it's different than Sabbath from the 70s. The same name, different internal chemistry, and that tells us something crucial. Four original members weren't interchangeable parts, they were the band. In other words, if Sabbath has the same trajectory without its members, then what Bruce Dickinson's saying is true, that Geezer and Tony are enough. But if what Dio is saying is true, then the chemistry was not the same, despite the name staying the same. Now here is the final bit of evidence, the 5-album run, from Black Sabbath through Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. 5 albums, 5 masterpieces, no reset, no decline, no filler. They didn't refine a genre, they invented one and then immediately explored it for all it was worth. No other band has ever created a genre and then produced 5 consecutive albums of this depth within the genre they started. This has only happened, as far as I can tell, one time. Now, could a band today have that level of internal harmony? Possibly. Look at a band like The Warning. 3 sisters, don't really sound anything like Sabbath, but they have that kind of indestructible chemistry. If you removed a member, the band would collapse. But what's almost certainly gone forever, and what makes Black Sabbath so special, is that they were floating in a sea of their own making. There was no genre, no rulebook, no expectations. 4 people together inventing a new musical language without even knowing that it had a name. So Bruce Dickinson is right that Black Sabbath is one of the greatest metal bands ever. In fact, they are the greatest metal band ever. But he's wrong to reduce their power to Tony and Geezer alone. And he's mistaken about only the first 2 albums being masterpieces, because the first 5 albums worked. And this harmony is due to the fact that the 4 individual members were present, and they are all 4 irreplaceable. That's not just greatness, that's lightning caught in a box. So My question to you is, do you agree with Bruce Dickinson that Sabbath remains Sabbath as long as Tony and Geezer were present, or do you take the point of view that the band required all four members to create the kind of firestorm and magnitude that Sabbath had at its best? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Music Guru here, asking you to help us on our march to 10,000 subscribers. Welcome, members. For over 50 years, Ozzy Osbourne has been known as the Prince of Darkness. The image is iconic. Black clothes, wild eyes, bats, pentagrams, and the frontman of Black Sabbath, the band many people credit with inventing heavy metal. For a lot of people outside of rock music, Ozzy became almost a cartoon symbol of something dark or even sinister. But recently, Jack Osbourne has said something fascinating in an interview. He mentioned that his father was often a Bible-reading Christian. Now, that raises an interesting question. How does the man known as the Prince of Darkness end up being a Bible-reading Christian? Well, let's explore the question a little, because the real story of Ozzy Osbourne is much more complicated than the legend. In a recent conversation, Jack Osbourne made an observation that surprised many people.